By now most of you have already heard the news. DICE has dug the grave for Battlefield 5, and come June, they're going to be officially burying it. The game will never have the opportunity to launch another large content set like the Pacific Theater, and with the small content patch coming in June, the game is definitely going out with a whimper instead of a bang. With much of the world dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and a lot of DICE and other game studios working from home, a disruption to a normal game launch schedule would be expected at this point. It's affecting almost all game launches out there, and even of course the live services. Even given Battlefield 5's incredibly rocky history though, this sudden announcement of them throwing in the towel, apparently to focus efforts towards the next Battlefield launching in 2021, is still quite surprising. Honestly guys, this game's development has just been such an absolute train wreck. Watching this game throughout its life cycle is like watching your parents fight. You're concerned and you want to help, but you're kind of just helpless watching the disaster in progress. For me, Battlefield 5 is probably one of the most frustrating game launches that I've been a part of. Especially because the World War II setting is Battlefield. It's where the series started, and to see DICE squander that incredibly rich setting and so much potential is beyond frustrating. This is going to set us back so much for historical Battlefield titles. Again, something that I was incredibly excited for. We're probably not going to see another World War II Battlefield for at least another decade, and I can't even describe to you guys how much that disappoints me. There's just so much potential that has been squandered and thrown away here. Especially because, as a kid, I barely got to play the original Battlefield 1942 demo because I didn't have high-speed internet, enough at least at the time, to actually play the full multiplayer game. So I was left reading articles in PC Gamer about this large-scale World War II battle simulator as I saw it, with controllable tanks and airplanes and ships, and I had been holding out hope ever since I was a kid that a World War II Battlefield would come around that I could finally be a part of. Instead of that reimagining of Battlefield 1942, we got Battlefield 5. I think the initial word that I would use to describe Battlefield 5's launch and overall announcement is just confusion. I remember that initial announcement live stream, sitting there going, oh man, could it actually be true? Could World War II be next? And then we have the devs talking about this is going to be the most immersive Battlefield yet, and they're showing those brief glimpses of World War II concept art, and I'm freaking out. It's actually gonna be happening. World War II is next. And then we got that launch trailer, which would have been fine maybe as a trailer for Bad Company 3 with a World War II tint to it, but no, this was a full historical, supposedly immersive, as they described it, Battlefield title. Not only was it not what people were expecting, but it wasn't what they wanted either, and they made it very, very clear to the developers. Some of the feedback was, of course, quite nasty, as you might expect. It is the internet, where a lot of this feedback comes from. But a lot of the real fans, myself included, were left confused and disappointed. However, for the most part, the devs responded to that nastiest part of the feedback, leaving comments like, if you don't like it, don't buy it, which would end up not being a challenge, but more of a prophecy. Even so, over the summer of 2018, as we saw more concept art and more slight teases for Battlefield 5, I was holding out desperate hope that we'd still get at its core a World War II game. Seeing Norway as the initial highlights for the game, the first maps that were being shown off, was, again, somewhat confusing, but I was okay with their concept for the game. A historical look at World War II through unseen battlefields, as long as it would end with the known battlefields. I was like, okay, it's a chronological look at World War II. We're going to start out with Norway. We're going to start out with Belgium. Some of the unknown battlefields early in the war. The battle for France that you just don't see a lot in those early days of World War II. We don't see a lot of games that cover this content. I'm like, okay, if the live service delivers, this could actually be something new and quite good. But it's gonna have to wrap things up with that known World War II content to make a complete package. Throughout the rest of that summer, we continued to see just unusual, unknown locations instead of seeing the exciting World War II content that fans wanted. And then we also had the confusing announcement of Battle Royale, which had already started to fade there in the middle of 2018, and the announcement of which was met with, again, more confusion from the overall Battlefield community. Despite the additional signs of trouble in fall 2018 with an overall delay for the game's launch, I was still hopeful, and I got flown out to preview the game right before it launched, and I finally got to see all the World War II content that I had been hoping was there behind the trailers and sneak peeks that we had seen so far. There were the Tiger tanks, there were the Spitfires, there's the crumbling bridge in Belgium, there's at least some of the familiar World War II weapons and vehicles. This is actually going to be a return to World War II, and that's actually what I called one of my first videos after the game officially launched in November of 2018. Welcome back to World War II. Guys, I was optimistic. That little taste was enough to get me on board once again. Sure, unknown stories of World War II, that's fine. Let's just keep going, DICE, and see those known stories as well. Surely we're going to get the complete World War II package, right? Well, not only did the delays continue after launch, but nearly every feature that launched in early 2019 felt unfinished or unfulfilled. Look at the practice range, for example. When was the last time you guys actually used the practice range for anything? They poured a ton of effort into voiceovers and making it this unique experience, but it seemed like almost no time was spent in actually making it useful. You had an overall limited vehicle and weapon selection, meaning that you couldn't actually really test a whole lot beyond the basics. Then you had the supposed co-op, which turned out to be just basically AI zombie wave horde modes that you can play with your friends. I played that for about 2 seconds and never tried it again. It was terrible, the AI was dumb, it wasn't interesting. The multiplayer is where Battlefield is always shown strong, and that's where I wish they had put more focus. That co-op mode was beyond useless. And let's not even talk about how the most World War II of the single-player missions ended up being post-launch content. Again, everything just felt so rushed. Coming from Battlefield 1, I also had high hopes for Grand Operations. Operations mode had been one of the biggest game mode successes in Battlefield 1, the previous title, adding a cinematic flair to a sequential series of battlefields, and making it feel like you were in one huge fight that told a historical story as part of World War I. Well, surely they can just improve on that slightly for Battlefield 5, right? World War II has even more opportunities for these grand operations. Instead of more grand, we got grand operations that were far less grand. No cinematic intros, and very disjointed missions that didn't actually feel like sequential battles frequently. There were also huge balance issues that either were never fixed or took months and multiple patches to get fixed. How do you make your premiere mode worse just one game later? Finally, there in early 2019, we got hints that we'd be heading to Greece for the next stage of the fight. And again, sure, that's fine, but where was the actual World War II content? Are we going to actually see us progressing onto the Western Front with D-Day? Are we going to see the battles in Russia, Stalingrad? Are we going to see the Pacific? No, we're going to see Battle Royale. That, of course, came next in March of 2019, and to my surprise, it was actually a really, really good Battle Royale mode. They had an entire dedicated team just for Battlefield 5 Firestorm, but because it had that pay gate where you had to buy a controversial, mostly multiplayer game, Battlefield 5, in order to enjoy the Battle Royale, it had a very brief lifespan. For a couple of months, me and my squad were actually playing tons more Firestorm than the base game of Battlefield 5, which seemed to be stagnating, just waiting for that Greece content. Firestorm was a ton of fun, but within a couple of months the population was dropping like a rock. DICE added a few small changes to how looting worked and to the map overall, and promised big upcoming changes to Firestorm as a whole, which were cancelled officially by midsummer 2019. Firestorm was the first true sign that this game was going to have no real long-term support. It was dropped with almost no fanfare whatsoever so quickly in mid-2019. At the same time, the content that we actually got, besides the brief launch of the Greek Merida map, became mostly paid cosmetics and random mode rotations. Rush mode coming and going, squad conquest coming and going, and it really felt like they were just stringing us along. Finally, in June at EA Play, we got to see Al Sundan, a large, true Battlefield map that was finally going to be coming out very soon, right there in June. Sure, it was based off of a single-player map, but again, at least it was a true, large, vehicle-based Battlefield map. Well, continuing the theme of Battlefield 5's disaster, it wouldn't launch until September. It had a ton of technical issues, even though I got to play it at EA Play, that would push that launch back for months. In the meantime, we got one small, decent infantry map in July, and finally an underground weapon unlock grind map in October. Don't get me wrong, that's an amount of content that was finally starting to ramp up, but it all felt so disjointed, and already we were seeing their chronological plan for World War II falling apart. Now we're not just telling the unknown stories of World War II, we're just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks and what we can actually ship and get out the door. Really though, I think the high point for Battlefield 5 was most definitely the launch of the Pacific content. They came out swinging with a great trailer, a ton of content, new maps, and it actually launched very quickly, within weeks after the full trailer and announcements. And that was quite a surprise. And it worked well, and it had tons of great content that we were actually looking for. The M1 Garand was back, guys. We had a new Japanese faction. We had the Zero Fighter. This was World War II, again, finally, as we were hoping for. So what does DICE do with all of that excitement and goodwill? Just about 5 weeks after launching that new content, they release a weapon balance patch that completely changes everything, increasing the time to kill, and for most of the community, completely ruining the gunplay. One of the few strong pillars of Battlefield 5 throughout the entire fiasco of the game's development. People actually liked the gunplay, as it had been improved since Battlefield 1. So instead of supporting the Pacific content launch with just more content, DICE introduced a huge new controversy right over the holiday season at the end of 2019, causing a massive player exodus. Even though DICE would launch additional content and a new map for the Pacific Theater, it was buried beneath all the negative attention from these unwanted game balance patches. By the time DICE would revert most of those changes in March of this year, 2020, it was already too late. The player base, I am sure, because I saw it dwindling, was dwindling. Meanwhile, you have other indie FPS shooters here on PC, including Hell Let Loose and Postscriptum, releasing large World War II content drops for their fans for free. Meanwhile, in Battlefield 5, we're going, well, most of the weapons feel pretty good again. I mean, they broke a few things for the planes and vehicles again, but things are kind of working, so maybe we'll get some new content soon. Enter COVID-19, everyone starts working from home. Battlefield number 6 maybe is due out in 2021, and it looks like EA has pulled the plug on Battlefield 5. No Normandy, no Stalingrad, no Berlin. We're going to see none of the most known battles of World War II going forward. What an incredibly awful missed opportunity for a game that has already had so much poured into it and has had such highs and such lows. I don't know if this COVID-19 work from home scenario was a huge part of this cancellation or just the final nail in the coffin. Given the game's rocky development and its sporadic live service, I would probably bet that it was just a nail in the coffin. But as I've been saying this whole time, guys, I don't think I could be more disappointed that DICE has squandered the World War II theme on this game. We're not going to see another World War II Battlefield title for at least a decade, and I don't even know if I'll still be playing Battlefield by the time that comes around, if it ever does. I also bet that we're going to see almost no historical Battlefield titles at all for at least the next couple of cycles. Yeah, Modern Warfare is great and all, but we already have Battlefield 3 and 4 that you can pick up and play right now. I just don't feel enthusiastic right now about going back to a Modern Warfare setting. Or maybe I'm just a bit, I guess you could say, heartbroken over what Battlefield 5 has ended up becoming. So, are you guys in the same boat? Let me know what your thoughts are about this final announcement of this final patch for Battlefield 5, and what does this mean for you looking at DICE's last couple of game launches and live services as you're looking at Battlefield 2021? Are you even going to give it a second look? I want to know what you guys think. For now, I'm going to go sign off. and probably go pour a stiff drink. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.